Hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of Foreign Takes. I'm your host, Mr. YT, alongside Mr. KG of Sadness and Mr. Big Lev, who is completely checked out of the season. Boys, how you doing today?
Checked out, as you mentioned.
Checked out, as you said, man.
We're at that point of
Doing
the
well.
Premier League.
I'm fearful. I think what I prophesized, the City going on, yet another winning run and not letting anyone have any chance, is very close to coming true. It saddens me that that's going to happen again, and Bold Fraud will have his number 4.
I mean, we might as well jump right into it. So that is exactly what happened. Fulham 0, Man City 4 over the weekend. We all knew it was coming, right? It was just so predictable.
Your point, your hope in this whole saga was Spurs. And from what I saw, Spurs are, what's it called? Flying kites. And
Like,
enjoying
Heights? I have not heard of that. What does that mean?
I mean, they're flying kites on their training session, on the training ground.
oh, you mean Fulham?
Just like Fulham. Yeah. No, Tottenham did it as well.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
That's how you know we're in garbage time, essentially, right? At this part of the season.
Nobody cares.
Nobody cares. But honestly,
here's a question that I have for you. If City win a four-peat, do you think that other leagues are much more interesting? For example, the Bundesliga, where this season two of the teams were in the semifinals. The winner is in the finals of the Europa League. Premier League is kind of like game week 5:34 is boring already. I mean, it's boring for United fans. Liverpool fans probably once they dropped out as well. It's just meh.
Well, Premier League is the only league left that's undecided. Everywhere else, it's been done. Italy is done. Germany is done. Spain is pretty much done at this point. The only thing with the City is just like they're in this like weird, when Barcelona and Real 2009, 2014, they would just go and have 99 points every season. They're in this mode because they have unlimited resources, and once we are curtailed that, I think the Premier League will continue to be amazing.
Yeah,
Mm.
I mean, I was reading a stat which was Arsenal this season have already beat the points tally of their invincible seasons, which is crazy to say, right? It's like that was considered one of the top, and yet it shows you that despite what KG's dislike of the invincibles, but the point being that City have set a new standard. Like it's essentially like high 80s, high 90s in order to be able to win a Premier League, which is unheard of.
12 draws. 12
Yeah.
draws.
Sure,
That's
but
all
my
I'm
point
gonna
is that you could still win it at the time with 12 draws, but now City is like, if you're not going in the 90s, essentially you're not going to beat City, as I've seen with Liverpool. So I actually agree with Big Lev. I think Premier League is still the most interesting because it's the only one that could still be changed on the last day of the season. But it's just disappointing because it's City for the fourth time, essentially, in a row.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing much to say about City. It's just, I mean, do they even have people who are interested in what they do? I don't know. I don't see much. I see here and there some City fans, but
I have a question about that actually, and I'm curious because obviously I think the three of us are a result of the generation that we grew up in. You know, who was on top in terms of like the Premier League. Do you think that City's domination now will result in a huge like up of young fans? Say maybe in like 10 to 15 years, will we see a huge spike in Man City fans, or is that just different? You think so?
Yes, I can already see that in US specifically, man. A lot of new City fans and people who are kids now, they did not see that City being demolished by Middlesbrough 7-1 and stuff, and them spending their way to glory. They're seeing it now when they're like Guardiola came, they're like unstoppable. They have KDB, they have Haaland, so it's definitely going to generate that. For them, we are just cranky old men who bitch and moan about the good old times and how this was not how it's supposed to be doing. But for the kids, this is like still an amazing club.
I agree and somewhat disagree. I think that they will have a lot of fans that are growing up. They're going to be happening them in the next 5 years, but I mean, I don't know what's going to happen with the 115 charges, but I don't think they're going to stay as loyal as this generation's loyal. Like they're not going to go through what YT as an Arsenal fan went through, or Big Lev went through with Liverpool. I mean, Liverpool's strike is hitting now, but Liverpool's always good in the Champions League. But in the league, the suffering, like they're not going to go through that. They'll find a new team to support. And in the US and in North America in particular, I just find that a lot of these people who support City are those, and American fans in general, they're very bandwagon on average. I mean, they are very bandwagon. Unless you're from Kansas, you're not going to be supporting the Chiefs. But because Pat Mahomes is such a big thing, they would jump from Tom Brady to Pat Mahomes as the best QB and support those individual people. And once City stop being relevant, they'll find someone else to support and they'll jump on that bandwagon, especially the older you are when you become a fan. You'll be like, why am I watching this suffering? I like this type of football that's they played, but there's another team that's playing that type of football. I'm going to support them. I'm supporting those characters. And I think the young ones are just that idea of loyalty. I don't think is being set through to this younger generation. I think when we were
Interesting.
growing up, I think it was a big deal of like being an Arsenal fan, being a Liverpool fan, being a United fan. It was like this: you're either with us when we lose, or you're not with us when we win. And you needed to know the history of the club, why you support them. I don't think that's much of a case right now. Man City, especially because they have no history, and like them having that culture around them. I don't think that's the case now.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Honestly, I feel like it's one of those things that it's so different. Football has evolved so much from when we started watching to today. I want to keep an eye out on. I just going back to the two other teams we're talking. There was the speaking of the Premier League title. Arsenal came through with a 1-0 win against Man United at the Theatre of Streams, as everyone is dubbing it.
Streams,
Streams. Have you
theater of
seen the
streams.
videos of the waterfall and the
Oh
the, the
yeah,
terrible state of Old
yeah.
Trafford? Um,
And this is to the argument of all the people who go like, "Oh, but the Glazers they invest so much into the club. You buying Anthony for 100 million, yeah, but they're not giving a shit about the roof, are they? And it's not about non-match day going fans and match day going fans. It's about like you want to have the best stadium and the best training ground possible for your potential stars to come in and train well. You know, it's not only like for fans who are going to the games.
I mean, the football on the pitch really mimicked everything outside the pitch, right? It seemed like an absolutely dreary game. It just like as bad as Arsenal were, I feel like United had the ability to step up and beat them, and yet did not manage to. Does that sounds about right?
I it sounds about right, but at the same time, who could have played? Who could have played that could have stepped up in the sub? Like the only good player during that game was Ahmad, and Ahmad got injured for Anthony. That's the state of the substitutions that United had. I think two things that came obvious to me after this game is that United tweaked their lineup and their tactics. Ten Hag actually finally did something that we were screaming on this podcast, by the way. We were saying, why don't you plug in those holes? And he did that. He put Amrabat in mind. Amrabat had, Amrabat, I think, was the best player on the pitch. Again, in that game, which gave them a lot of shit throughout the season, and he didn't play. But the time that he needed, he stepped up. And United were actually solid on the board. And two, Arsenal were just shitting themselves. Arsenal was shitting. The fans were shitting themselves. Arsenal was shitting themselves. And I'm wondering if Casemiro didn't stay asleep for 1 minute, what would happen? What would happen if that didn't happen? Because it was Arsenal didn't have much of a careful or like not careful but dangerous moments throughout the game.
Yeah. I mean, we heard Arteta afterwards, right? He essentially criticized the team, saying they were too afraid. It seemed like they were the history of playing at Old Trafford, where essentially we've had a terrible record, was really catching up to it. But the truth is, you have to win ugly in order to win, right? These are the kinds of games that you have to win in order to stay in the race. So a win's a win at
It's
the end of the day.
it seemed like
Yeah.
there was a deal made between I don't know, like the most perfect deal that could have been made between fans, players, managers. Like, we beat you, not bad. You show some glimpse of structure. We win you 1-0. You continue to roll on and have a chance against Manchester City. Ten Hag, now the tide in the information war change. Like, oh, Ten Hag can stay for another season. It's not completely bad after 4-0 versus Crystal Palace. They showed some guile. So it was a win-win, even though United lost. It was a win-win on all fronts, I think.
Yeah. I think just on that point, though, as far as United are concerned, it's just the FA Cup left, right? Because if we talk about the race for the European spots, the way it's lined up is that if Villa, essentially after today's win, they're at 68 points. They have the Champions League spots. It doesn't look anyone's going to overturn them. And then it looks like United, Chelsea, and Newcastle are essentially fighting for the last Europa Conference League spot. So United are at disadvantage. They're at 54 points. Chelsea and Newcastle at 57 points. It's still interesting, right? It could go any which way at the end of the season.
I would rather United finish eighth and not go to the Conference League. And if they win the FA Cup and if they get potentially a spot in Europe with the FA Cup, so be it. If they don't, it doesn't matter to me. I don't want them to play in Europe. I'd rather them skip a year in Europe, have less games, sell all the dead wood, get a new manager, not get a new manager. I don't think they're going to get a new manager. I think that tide has changed. So
The,
speaking of the Europe, yeah,
well, then this comes back to what Big Lev has said throughout the year, which was, hey, it wasn't worth being in non-Champions League, because he said that the entire time. It just says, hey, it's taking too many resources. Big Lev, do you think it's going to be the same thing for United, that it's just easier for them to get out of it and reset? Or
Of course, man. It's like just get out of it. Like it is not like if you're in there, it's easy to win. As you know, Liverpool showed this year. So using that as your kind of backup to Champions League, I feel it's a losing strategy as opposed to kind of really going all in on the Premier League and
but
top
isn't that
four.
the difference, that United are won't realistically be going for the title? Or do we think it doesn't matter whether you're fighting for the title or not? It's just going to your Conference League is not worth it.
No. United's gonna get from Conference League. How is that different from winning a League Cup? I just,
Good
for
point.
me, it's not a like United can still win like an FA Cup, League Cup. They can win FA Cup today, so it's not like I'm starved. I haven't had any titles, sorry, any trophies in 20 years. I'd much rather have a solid campaign in Premier League and finish in the top four without trophies than struggle in Premier League and have like a Europa Conflict title, which no one will
I'll
ever remember.
I'll tell you what it makes a difference. It makes a difference at the bottom line, and it makes a difference for a club and brand like Man United. They probably have deals that in them it's penned out that you need to be playing in Europe. For example, they had a deal with Adidas, like if you miss the Champions League or European tournaments for like for 2 out of the next 4 years, the payment goes down by 25% or something like that. So on the bottom line, it hurts the brands, or they would rather be in the Conference League. The fans probably don't give a shit, just like you said. Well, like Europa League is fun to play in. It's good to compete in, but then once it gets in the way, if you're actually competing in the league, you can throw it out, bin it. I think everyone does it. Everyone starts in all the league competitions. Look at Spurs; they've been binning all the cups every time because they think they're going to be good in the league, but then they finish fifth. So it's not that; it's about being in the competition, having that extra budget allowed, and the FFP as well.
Interesting.
So yeah,
Speaking of, Spurs, they seem to have lost out after today's result because of Aston Villa, drew 3-3 at home to Liverpool. This seemed like a dead game for Liverpool, but they had a big advantage, but Villa took it back at the very end. Not much to say if you're Klopp and Liverpool, right, Big Love?
No, it's like it's disappointing, man. They look so unstructured defense, but I already heard some rumors about defenders coming from Leverkusen or here or there. It's fun games to watch, and when there's nothing to fight for, I think you can also see it in a team where people are just either trying to get their own individual glory or just trying something different or don't have that extra 5% energy that helps them get out. For example, the third goal today, like McAllister looked cooked already. Van Dijk looks exhausted. So we are just kind of limping to the finish now.
Yeah. On the flip side, Villa looked absolutely rejuvenated, right? Because this game, I think KG called it in the first couple minutes. He said it's going to be a 3-2 kind of game, even before the goal had even come in. But this game could have easily been 6-6, right? It was just a
Yeah.
ridiculously open game with no quality, essentially, or too much quality or lack thereof.
yeah, it was a game of like there's no proper structure in each side, and just attack and attack and attack. So it was just expected like that. So it's good for Aston Villa. They're in the top four, cutting off Spurs there, and Liverpool. They're just gonna say goodbye to Klopp in their last game and look forward to the next step. I don't know what's the next step gonna look like. I think this team might overachieve this year, and I've been saying that since the start of the season. I don't know if we're gonna do our review our league positions that we did as our last sort of couple of podcasts. But I did put Liverpool fourth because I was thinking that they're just going to come short. They came in third, just short. I don't know if that's going to be enough. I don't know what kind of a manager Arne Slot is to change the way they play. Whether they're going to be playing the same way is going to be building up, or they're going to be changing completely the way they play. But that team still needs to be A lot of materials needs to be added. A lot of materials needs to be changed. Some needs to be substituted in the right time. So Liverpool's going to be strong next season. It just depends how strong.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, another team that I think, just moving on past that, we don't know, but it looks like they're ending real well, is Chelsea. So they beat Forest away at home from home 2-3. Once again, who else but Cole Palmer, Mr. Cole Palmer, as they like to say, Mr. St. Kitts and Nevis, just basically dragged into this game. Were we expecting this, considering where we were the first couple months, that Chelsea would suddenly come up and try to steal a European spot?
Completely no.
I
No.
mean, they're still in what European spot? Number 6?
They're 1-6, and they're like, they could, depending on the last game, they could end up in the fifth spot. Oh, sorry, in the sixth
Seventh.
spot, sixth or seventh, yeah, depending. Which could possibly mean Europa League for them. Like, there is still a possibility.
Yeah, that doesn't say anything, man. The distance between where they are and where Aston Villa begins, so a fourth spot, is huge. So for them, it's that's a huge work for next year.
Do you keep Poch in that case, like to keep building after he's shown that, especially the last part of the season, that the team's beginning to click? Is it worth keeping him for the project, or do you chop and change again?
Honestly, you probably need to keep him just because there's not a lot of everything out now in the market is a huge risk. There's no
Yep.
like, you know what, you're gonna bring back Tuchel again. That's out. Arne Slot, Liverpool got him, also a risk, but we had to get someone because Klopp is leaving. Who Amorim, he showed some red flags with the whole like talking to West Ham thing, and apparently people are like, could be worth a shot, but like you're not gonna say, oh, Ruben Amorim is gonna be much better than Poch, and especially like he comes in and he'll probably need to also buy a bunch of people to restructure it under his playing style. So at this point, you just keep Poch, let him sell who needs to sell, and bring in one or two his guys, and let him deal with it. Because if you bring in a complete new guy and you completely change it again, you're gonna run into the same issue that you do not have consistency at your club.
Interesting, yeah.
Can we quickly talk about the Player of the Year nominees and how Gabriel and Saliba were just ignored? Best defense in the league, and they don't even put them in the top 5 players. This is criminal. Criminal.
Criminal, especially the fact that Van Dijk made it over them. It's a little surprising.
What is Isaac doing there? I get it. They could remove some of them. Van Dijk, all of those players are just for clout. It's for marketing. You know, like how can you not put Saliba and Gabriel when they're the best defensive partnership in the league? It's just criminal. Like it, and then they make people laugh. Oh, why did it not take a name? Or everyone goes, it's an EAFC league. Because this is the reason why. This is the reason why. What did Van Dijk do this season to be in the top 5? What did he do? He was
Get abandoned by Trent and be so low in the back.
I don't know what to say. I think if there was a best defense in the league, or if they're not in the top 11 for the season, then I'm just going to be disappointed because
Yeah.
there should be the main starting partnership. Like, I'm sorry, Ake and Guardiola are not good enough to be even in the nomination compared to them.
Completely agreed. We're going to cover that at the end of the season. We're going to compare the top 11 from the Premier League versus what we think actually was the correct ones. Just going back to a different league entirely, for Germany, FC Hollywood, aka Bayern's shit show continues. Hansi Flick now seems to have either rejected, or the club seems to be leaking information about him that they're actually not interested, but it seems like he actually rejected them. It's a disaster for a club, correct? Like, everywhere Kane goes, it's just a disaster, essentially.
Yep, they're probably going to keep Tuchel. There are rumors about it now that they're like, we changed our mind. And Tuchel's open to it. Of course, he's open to it because nobody else is
Where is
leaving.
he gonna go?
Of course, and
Dude,
that's
that
part of
was-
the reason.
No, I honestly, even if he won the Bundesliga by what he did in the Real game, that should be fireable offense. This guy is one goal up, takes off his main two attacking threats, and basically is like, okay, if they score, we're just fucked. That was
Not,
so bad. Like, I understand you trying to, not gotta stay more solid, but you cannot take off both of your main goal scorers, okay? You need to keep at least, because after the second Joselu goal, there was
Yep.
nothing Bayern even could do. It was
yeah,
done.
it's not only about that. It's the way he substituted him 20 with 15 plus added time to go, so 20 minutes, knowing the Champions League. He took off Kane. He took off Musiala. And he didn't put anyone who's like equivalent. He put on Choupo-Moting and he put a central defender, meaning that they wanted to defend. They wanted to save the result. It wasn't about, because after that he made an argument. Kane was injured, that's why I substituted him. Regardless, you play Kane until the 80th minute, 82nd minute. You then substitute him. You don't do it on the 75th minute. You don't put an extra center back. And that is alone, as Big Love mentioned, that's a sackable offense.
Yeah, we'll talk about the Champions League in a bit. But just quickly, I want to just quickly touch on Serie A. So very set of interesting results this past weekend for the Champions League. So Atalanta beat Roma at home 2-1, and Bologna beat Napoli away 2-0. So it essentially means Bologna has finished in a third spot. They're tied for points in third and fourth with Juventus at 67 points. Atalanta is in fifth with 63 points, but they have a game in hand, and Roma is behind them at 60. For all intents and purposes, it looks like Bologna has qualified for the Champions League, and Atalanta is realistically going to qualify for the Champions League. Fantastic achievements for both of them, correct? They're completely over it, punching above their weight.
I caught the Atalanta versus Roma game. Atalanta was miles ahead of Roma. Miles. The amount of chances that they didn't score is just mind-boggling. Atalanta should have had the game. The game should have been 5-1. That's how many chances Atalanta had. The penalty that Roma got was dodgy to say the least. Like if you rewatch the Tammy Abraham penalty, it's like any given day in the championship in the league, that foul is happening. He shot the ball went, and then after the defender took his leg away, so it's post action. He had a free shot, he missed, and then the defender slid into him. That's not a penalty. They gave a penalty. They tried to reignite Roma. Good for Atalanta. And by seeing the way Atalanta played, they finally kickstarted because they were very bad at the beginning of the season. They were one of the top teams last season and they didn't perform well in the first half. Now that they're playing in the final against Bayern Leverkusen, that's going to be a fire game. That's going to be a fire game to watch.
I mean, it's funny you say that because, I mean, Atalanta, I think, have had 4 wins in their last 5 games. And on the flip side, Juventus, who were very clearly number 2, have essentially had a terrible second half of the season. I think they are now on 5 or 6 draws in a row. Just Max Allegri, I heard this funny thing on one of the podcasts saying Max Allegri and Eric Ten Hag should switch spots just because they're both mediocre. You don't want that, KG?
No, I'll rather keep Ten Hag. I've seen Ten Hag's heights. I've seen also Allegri's heights with a dead league, but I would prefer Ten Hag. I'm sorry. Allegri should just... This is what Bayern should get. Allegri. Maximiliano Allegri to Bayern. Perfect. They'll play with Eric Dyer, Kim Min-jae, and Jim Min-jae, whoever is the third defender. And they'll play with perfect football. 5-3-2. Perfect. They can have that.
It's going to be insane. I think we should just move on to European football. Just quickly, I think it's worth touching on the 3 European finals remaining. So just going from bottom to top, the Europa Conference League, Club Brugge to Fiorentina. Aston Villa completely got destroyed by Olympiacos. The final will be Olympiacos against Fiorentina. Was this expected? In many ways, I think a lot of people were expecting Aston Villa to kind of destroy them and make it way, but it seems like a very interesting matchup.
English teams shat the bed again. No, I mean, Olympiacos had more to gain. The final is in Athens, so Olympiacos would have a home advantage. The interesting thing is that Fiorentina is playing in the second Conference League final in a row, I believe. They played against West Ham, David Moyes, the previous winner, who's without a job. By the way, Bayern Munich, you can get Moyes in. Get Moyes in Bayern Munich. That's a perfect signing for you. Usually, like what happens in football is that if there is like a second team that plays in the final, they win it if they lost the previous one. But I think home advantage, Olympiacos should be able to knock them off their perch. It seems kind of a weird one.
Agreed. It'll be a good game to watch. Then I think the more interesting one is obviously the Europa League, where Leverkusen, of course, are now unbeaten in 50, made it all the way through against this Atalanta team. In many ways, this is, I think, would be my pick of the finals, of the 3 finals, right? This is going to be an amazing game, Leverkusen via Atalanta.
And we should also mention that the Leverkusen somehow were 2-0 down and came back on 95th minute and didn't lose again. From now on, when we speak about Invincibles, let's just talk about, we mean Leverkusen, okay?
It's not done yet, though. To be very clear, it's not finished yet. They still have 3 games to go.
Yeah, I have 1 Bundesliga game, 1. They're meeting Kaiserslautern in the DFB Pokal. Oh, yeah. No.
And Arsenal Invincibles were just invincible in the league. They lost in other competitions, so...
So I have a question for you guys. So obviously, assuming Leverkusen wins this, they'll have a treble with the Europa League, the Bundesliga, and the Pokal. But if they stay unbeaten, is that a better treble than the trebles of United, Barcelona, and Bayern Munich when they did their locals, but it wasn't unbeaten? Which would be better?
On par. I would say it's on par. It's equal.
No, the treble with Champions League is better, bro.
I mean,
At the end of the day, it's I think I don't know. You know
I'll
what?
give the
I'm
unbeaten.
rethinking. Yeah, yeah.
I'm giving I'm putting it on par. That can be called a treble. That can be
Right?
called it can be called a treble just because they didn't lose. And the Europa League, it didn't like. It's not a Europa League of when United won it with Ajax in the final. It's a Europa League where in your quarterfinals you had AC Milan, you had Liverpool, you had Atalanta, you had other teams. I forget who were the rest, but Benfica, who was out of the Champions League. So it was a solid group of teams. They're not necessarily the B tier of Europe. It's just Giants who were a bit weak this year in the Champions League or in this Europa League. Any other year, you would call this Europa League road that they went on as a Champions League. Like if you just slapped the same games but put Champions League logo on it, you would have sold it. The only problem I have with Bayern Leverkusen is that Garba game because Garba would be beating them, and that would never happen. This whole story would never happen. That red
Yeah.
card was a farce.
Look at this guy,
I'm
Big
telling
Lev.
you.
He refuses to let it die.
Bro, let it go. Let it go.
Just
Nobody
let
would
it
remember
go.
it.
But here's the question: like, is really like that unbeaten treble more impressive than if they won a Champions League treble and lost one game somewhere in there?
No, but lost one game is one thing, but they didn't lose one game. There's not a single team that probably lost one game and got a treble. If Real Madrid does a treble, this
Well, how many
run
games did the City lose last year?
They
they
lost a
lost
handful because, especially in the
a
beginning of
handful.
the year, for example, they lost I think 4 or 5 games just in the beginning
Oh
of the
yeah,
year
because
alone.
last year the Premier League race was a scam.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, it'll be interesting. And then obviously, I think we should.
What do you think? Do you think it's on par or no?
I think it's on par. I agree. I think an unbeaten entire season is just unheard of. Like it's across 3 different tournaments. Also, it's on par. I know it's not the Champions League, but I agree with you. Some of the teams they beat were essentially Champions League quality teams. So if they make it and they still have a couple games to go, I think it's on par. In all
Do you think
honesty,
Javi Alonso should retire like Zidane and do like unfinished football?
no, I think it's going to be difficult for him though because he's starting on such a high. Where do you go from here? Right? It's like you win the treble and you're unbeaten in your first season. What on
You win the
earth do you
Champions
possibly?
League and that's it.
I guess I don't know. It'll be interesting. Speaking of the Champions League, so we got our finalists now. It is obviously not PSG. It is Dortmund v Real Madrid. I think, is this fair to say that the semifinals were probably more interesting than what the final will be? Because we had a Bayern Real Madrid fiesta, and then we had Dortmund absolutely upsetting the odds. Fair results overall?
Yes.
I would say yes, but I would also agree with what Bigelow said that Tommy T shat the bed. And I think the quarterfinals and semifinals was much more interesting. And it's again the same notion that I told you before that the brackets are not evenly matched. Because on the left side, you had Barca, who with 10 men couldn't hold the lead, essentially put themselves down the toilet. And you had PSG, who had Mbappe and was praying that he would find form, which he couldn't score against Borussia. And you have Borussia Dortmund, who beat PSG. That's your left side. And on the right side, you had all the heavy hitters who Real Madrid, with their experience, walks through again.
Do we think it's a heavy favorite Real Madrid or not heavy favorites?
I would say, who would you have against if I told you a 14-time winner of this tournament playing against a team that's won the tournament 0 times and played in the final once?
Whoa. They won it before.
Okay, won
1997,
once.
baby.
Yeah, once. Sorry,
Yeah,
and once
fine.
played in the final twice.
Yeah.
Who
Oh
would
no,
you?
the Real are overwhelming favorite just
Yeah.
because they're Real and everything. I don't
Overwhelming,
know.
right?
It would be cool though. Marco Reus lifting it before going out in the sunset
Yep,
against Real of
definitely.
all teams. But
Definitely.
yeah,
Once
it's gonna be very unlikely.
Yep. Once it was the final of, if it was a PSG Real Madrid final, I would be content with Real Madrid winning. But once it's like Dortmund versus Madrid, you always want to support the little guy. The context of the two clubs. But on the other hand, as a United fan, Jadon Sancho winning the Champions League, what? No, I don't know.
Hey,
I don't know.
he is raising his profile more and more, right? So you guys are probably going to be able to claw back some money now that he's been able to
From
show his legs.
I mean, who would buy him though? Borussia Dortmund already started crying that we don't have money for. They sold Haaland, Bellingham, and Sancho. They barely spent any of the paycheck, and they're crying we don't have enough money to pay 45 million for Sancho. That's a little bit scamish.
No,
That's
it's not. They don't have the money to pay 45. They don't want to pay 45.
exactly that's the problem. But United was like, if he's so great, if he goes on interviews saying, "I feel like at home, I am dribbling past players and not giving any proper passes, but I'm so cool," pay 45 million for him. Why?
I mean,
What's the
depending on what he does in the final, he might be raising his own price by a couple million, right? So, like, depending on how the
sure,
final goes.
sure.
But is there any? I guess the question is like, what scenario do we see Real Madrid losing? Because that's truly the question. Like this final, just hard to envision what happens for them to lose.
1-0 and
Well,
defense fully.
yeah, the Dortmund goes hard on defense, gets a goal towards the end of the game, and
Yep.
doesn't leave a lot of chances to come back.
Yeah, that's the only way, right? Because if they score early, that just gives
Yeah.
Real Madrid more time to come back with an equalizer and get more.
Exactly.
Speaking of getting an equalizer and scoring more, what did you think about the Bayern Munich game, Real Madrid? That comeback, though, that moment that should have been a goal that didn't because it was an offside. What did you?
I don't know. I think on the balance, at the end of the day, the right team won. To be honest, like Real Madrid deserved it, right? Even the goal Davies scored, Rudiger did all the right things, right? You have a left back playing as a left winger on his left foot. Where do you show him? You show him on the inside on purpose. Who would have expected Davies to curl one in from 30 meters out on his wrong? But then the rest of it, it was so predictable. I had no doubts. Unless it was the 92nd minute, I had no doubt that Real Madrid was going to score. No matter what decisions went against them, it was just too obvious. It's just too written in the start. This is what they've done to us for the last 6-7 years, especially deserved. Like I don't know what else to say. Like Munich, Big Lev talked about it perfectly. Tuchel made the worst substitutions, and I think there was some revisionist history where they were saying, "Oh, actually, Musiala was injured, Kane was injured." They were injured. Why did they survive 85 minutes? That's the
75.
thing. 75. But you still know there's another 10 minutes of extra time the way things are going.
No,
So
no,
it's not.
it's a bullshit excuse. He put on Kim Min Jae for Musiala to defend. He knew what he was doing. He thought that could outsmart a team that always comes back, and they need one goal to go to extra time. He wanted that result to be cemented on the 75th. He wanted to do the Donald Trump, stop the count at the 75 minute. That's what he wanted to do, and that backfired on him. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's
What do you think about the
ridiculous.
goal? That was offside-ish. I think that's a mistake by the referees.
Yeah, it's a mistake by the
Obviously,
referees. It's kind of a flip of the coin, to be honest. It's like, yeah, it's a mistake, but like, I can see it both ways. Yeah, it's a mistake, but also, like, they won at the end of the day, so I don't really think it matters that much, is the truth. You?
what about you, Iglev?
I don't know. It's a. I'm lost for words on that one.
Why?
It's a no.
Why?
Well, I saw it again, and there was some what's called angle where it looked like he was a little bit actually offside. So
That's what I'm
I
saying.
don't know. I don't know. The Real Madrid, man, in the past they had so many favorable calls that I'm not even surprised anymore. And this one wasn't. At least was kind of like not so blatant than the ones they got in like 2016, 2017. There was some
Exactly.
stuff going on there.
I guess the question to you,
Um,
KG, is did it really impact the result at the end of the day, in your opinion?
it could have impacted the result. Yes, I think if the referee lets the game play on, concern that everyone has is that the referee should have let the game play on,
Yes.
and then if they scored good, then it was a review to VR and whatnot. But since he didn't let that game play on, that's where the problem comes in because Bayern could have had a goal.
I know.
So
I
the
agree, but I
positive,
think sorry, just to jump in there, I think the thing I'm trying to my big problem with that is people are talking like it was a goal, right? It wasn't. They clearly stopped playing after the whistle was blown. The mistake was already made, but they were like, "Oh, it should be a goal." I'm like, "No, there was no." You saw,
Yeah.
Lunin did not actually try to save the goal. Really, he was like, and the defender stopped. So I think had it actually been a goal, it's one thing, but the fact that it was stopped, it was a mistake. There's nothing to undo, right? It's a mistake. You just have to live up to that. I'd rather it be an obvious mistake versus like it's a goal, it's not a goal. It wasn't a goal at the end of the day. Like it was a mistake before the goal, not a mistake on top of the goal. Does that make sense?
that makes sense. Yeah, the positive thing is that he was cancelled from to the next games. He's not going to be officiating the Euros or the opening of
Yes.
the Euros, something like that. So it's good to see that his mistake had some sort of effect on his ability, and he's next time he's going to think twice. Unlike the Premier League referees, where all the VARs and all the they just skip one game and then they're back officiating for the rest of the league season, making the season
Exactly.
unwatchable. So it's good to see.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think just to end, I have two random foreign takes for you guys. It's Mbappe officially announced that he is not going to be at PSG next season.
Shocker.
Oh
The
no,
Shocker.
who would have predicted that?
And it seems like him and Kalefi are having a fight. But as for
Yeah.
this is a non-story, right? It's like everyone knows where he's
Yeah.
going. Hopefully, we don't have to hear about it at the end of summer. There's not much to say, is there? Or am I missing something?
No, bro,
Uh,
this is done, and Mbappe has honestly, he's become as annoying as like a TikTok influencer with this constant need for attention.
Do you think that Mbappe makes this Real Madrid side worse with his ego that he brings? They win the
No.
Champions League and they can't win with him
No.
the
And
next
I'll
Well,
explain
5.
why. Carlo.
how do you make this team a lot better, though?
Good point.
I mean, they don't have their striker is Jose,
Yeah.
who's born and bred or like a big fan of Madrid. Traveled with the fans to the Paris final, scored 2. But now Jose's probably not staying, but he can win the Champions League, and then it's gonna be Mbappe up front. So it is a bit better, but I think personally, him bringing his ego made the dressing room. There's a reason why Ancelotti wants Kroos and Modric to stay, probably
Yeah.
to.
But I think Carlo knows. This is exactly what you said. Is Carlo knows how to manage. Carlo's been doing this for 30 years, right? Just like managing. He managed bigger egos with Ronaldo and Bale and so on. So that's why I think people are like looking for a reason for them to fail. But the truth is, they're still going to be laughing. They're still going to be winning next year, and we're all going to be annoyed that it's been working out seamlessly. I think this is just what Carlo Ancelotti does, to be honest. The Don
Ancelotti has a
himself.
year left, so if that doesn't fail in the first year, that can unbalance a lot of things. So
That's
we'll
true.
see.
Then they bring Zidane again, and then he controls all of them. They're just
We'll-
invincible. And then I think last topic was I think there was a video going around about something called like a manager mode. Was I think in the Danish Super League. It was essentially like for anyone who hasn't watched it, you can like search on Reddit. It's essentially a view of the game, and there's overlaying stats of the players and a small mini map of all the players live. What do you guys think of it? I thought it was a very interesting and unique way of watching a football game. That like you show more of the game.
I think it's
Yep.
FIFA Live mode. It's amazing. It's really good. You can actually analyze everything, and the tactics will come to life to you. So it's a really, really good way of watching football. I'm actually excited that the Premier League is going to bring it, or the Champions League, probably because they're more innovative with their stuff. That's a really interesting way to look at the game.
Does it feel like Premier League, just in football in general, doesn't really try to have this kind of, I don't want to call it disruptive technology, but evolution? I feel like we've been very static outside of VAR, which has been obviously terribly implemented.
La Liga has a lot of that. La Liga has a lot of tech innovations. Serie A has we're taking away the match ball to go for auction so we can have more money because we can't make any money from views. That's what Serie A has. And La Liga has a partnership with Microsoft, which they show very techy side of football, which I found is very cool because they show it in a very interactive way. So I think La Liga probably is going to take that, and that's going to be their next step. But the Premier League, no, they're barely getting in. They're making that offside automated rule just now, starting next season.
So backwards.
Yeah, I don't think because they have to make it corrupt. How else is City going to win if the referees are not flying to buy every fucking 3
It's going to
hours?
be interesting. I guess just to wrap up, I want to take your guys' quick prediction for the midweek game. That's tomorrow. So that is Spurs at home to City. Big Lev, what's your score prediction?
4-0 City.
All right, that sounds about right. KG, your score prediction?
3-1 City.
3-1.
I'll give you that goal difference advantage so you can sleep tight.
Yeah, Big Lev hit it right on where they take over our Arsenal's goal advantage by 1 goal. Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's going to be like 5-2 or something ridiculous like that, and it's going to be.
I want your prediction. Newcastle, Man United on Wednesday.
Oof. I'll be
Man
honest.
United at home.
Yeah.
Under the leaky roof, physically, literally and metaphorically.
I have a bad feeling for that Newcastle is going to take this. I think the United fan players just, unless Bruno is back and fully fit, I just don't think.
Bruno's missing the next game.
Yeah, so I think
The
that's game.
Yeah, the relegation contenders and Bruno make Man United shine. Yeah.
I think on that note, that's a goodbye from us.
Yep. See you next time.
Goodbye, everyone. Stay safe.